Where the hell do manufacturing execution systems come from? Like when a platform gets built, where do they come from?
So just don't get locked in, obviously avoid vendor lock. I would say don't buy software from a hardware vendor.
Right. And welcome to the Industry 4 Community Podcast. I'm your host with the most, Walker Reynolds. Our podcast this month is sponsored by Portainer, right? It's sponsored by Portainer. Docker management platform, part and parcel to every single stack I ever deploy. Portainer. All the mastermind students are constantly always asking me, how are you managing all these containers? The answer is Portainer. All right, so thank you to Portainer for supporting the Industry 4 community. Today's podcast, here's where the idea came from. So I've got Craig Scott, who is the CEO and founder of Fuuz. I had a chance to go do a deep dive with their organization last month, last 4 to 6 weeks or so. And I got to thinking when we were having the conversation, Craig has his own podcast, and I got to thinking when we were talking, we should do a podcast, and B, that podcast should be about where the hell do manufacturing execution systems come from? Like when a platform gets built, where do they come from? And I'm always preaching, you got to focus on the problem. And the best platforms come from people who are trying to solve a problem. That's where Fuuz came from. And so we invited Craig here to have a conversation about, okay, how do you build a manufacturing execution system from scratch as a platform? So Craig, welcome to the podcast. You want to quickly introduce yourself and we'll get into it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, Walker. Craig Scott, founder, CEO of Fuuz. We're an industrial intelligence platform based out of Rochester Hills, Michigan. So very excited to be here and great to be able to work with you guys and to hopefully evangelize what we can do with manufacturers here.
Awesome. What's your background? So we'll kind of get into the platform and stuff, but do you want to tell what is your background? I mean, I know you've been in manufacturing your whole career, but where did you start? How'd you come up?
Yeah, for sure. So my background, as you mentioned, is entirely in manufacturing. I actually started back when I was a sophomore in high school. I started as a process engineer for a company here locally that made some products like True Track. Like if you ever drove an IROC or a Firebird, you probably had a product in your differential that I designed when I was 16 years old. So
how did you get into that at 16?
I was in the co-op program. I mean, I was just really into like CAD design, and I was just into engineering. I thought it was fascinating. I grew up around cars. My dad restores classic cars and started wrenching when I was about 6 years old. So just always been a car guy in Detroit, right? Like what else is there to do in Detroit? So got into the business, put myself through college, nights and weekends, ended up getting a master's degree in manufacturing engineering, worked at a number of tier 1 automotive companies. My big goal, my big dream in life was always to go work at an OEM and be a CAD guy, because at the time, I mean, they were just making the big bucks. They were killing it. I thought FEA analysis was like the future, all that cool stuff. So ended up starting my own shop, had about 40 employees. We did a lot of CNC machining, metal stamping, all that kind of good stuff. Wound up, we had a downturn in the economy here about 2009, probably remember all that. So I found myself working at a company called Plex, who's now, part of Rockwell. So I was there a few years as a manufacturing consultant. And then I thought, I could probably do this different. So I started my own system integrator company here in the area and, focused on implementing ERP. We were kind of an IT down type of company.
Mm-hmm. Did you focused on Plex?
We did initially, yeah.
Okay.
Plex was like our go-to. We did about 400 Plex deployments in 7-ish years. So it was a big part of what we did. We tried to expand that and really, reach the shop floor, get into the machines, the controls, the industrial side of it. That wasn't really a strength from cloud systems, right? That was pretty difficult to do. So Became a platinum ignition integrator as well along the way. So we did a lot of ignition work. We did a lot of work with Boomi, a lot of different platforms. And as you can imagine, that was very challenging as an SI to have a team that was highly skilled in 8 to 10 different software applications, be able to support and maintain.
It's about impossible to manage. Yeah.
Yeah, it is terrible. I mean, it was difficult to scale as an integrator. But that's really what led us to developing the Fuuz platform. We knew there had to be a better way. There had to be an easier way, a more scalable way. We were really good at POCs, getting one plant up and going, getting one line. Everybody was jazzed. And then it's like, how do we roll this out to 100 sites? But I don't know. I guess we need to take 6 months and start setting up servers and start looking at all this infrastructure, so all of that, architecture that's involved, as I know you guys talk about a lot, that is challenging. So that's
the POC is the easiest part. I often say that, like, if you can't do a POC well, and that's a huge red flag, because the POC you have so much control over, and there's so little variance that you have complete control over the domain, right? And then it's you say this old adage, you were in tier 1. It's like, it's the old adage that you can always tell someone who doesn't work in manufacturing, because they never understand that there's no two assets that are exactly the same. That even if they were built by the same machine builder, there are small variations in each of those machines. And I say give the same sequence of operations to 10 different PLC programmers, and you'll get 10 different programs that do exactly the same thing, but they're completely different programs, right? And you could have the same machine builder deploy the same asset, 3 of the exact same asset, and there are deltas between the 3. And the person who never works in manufacturing doesn't know that. It's one of the easiest ways to vet. Does this person have actual manufacturing experience? Well, let me ask you this.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if this is controversial or whatever, but probably is. But for those of you who don't know, Plex is a smart manufacturing platform that was originally a standalone platform that was kind of like a hybrid MES ERP solution. Like, it really didn't fit all the way in MES, although it did cover the full MES suite. It didn't fit all the way in the MES layer, and it didn't fit all the way in the ERP layer. It was kind of like a shim between the two, where it was a really powerful functioning manufacturing execution layer, an L3 layer. But it was acquired by Rockwell Automation. Interestingly, I consulted on that M&A. I didn't know it. I was one of the blind consultants that they asked, about the acquisition, and then it happened 3 days later. What was missing in Plex? So outside of the political stuff, Rockwell going in the wrong direction, which clearly they did. Plex has gotten absolutely murdered in the market. How Rockwell? I mean, I'm not surprised that Rockwell.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole other podcast. But what was missing from just a technical perspective? What were the things that you would have done, since Plex was really your bread and butter? What would you have changed about Plex? And how did that drive what you developed in Fuuz? Because I had a chance to, I did a deep dive with these guys for a couple of days, and I got a chance to, like, really, really kick the tires. That is, I got to see platform architecture. I got to test it overnight. And it's brilliantly built. Like, it's about as optimally built as it can be, especially with there's a data layer that runs essentially in the center. It's essentially the hub of the entire platform, which is a multi-tenant platform. We'll get into how it's deployed. But why did you build Fuuz the way you did? What was missing in Plex that drove you to build Fuuz the way you did?
Well, it was, is in large part the lack of flexibility and extensibility. As you probably know, Plex is a monolith application, right? Written in pretty legacy tech. It was never really designed for cloud scale. It originally was an on-prem solution that migrated to the cloud. It was called Plex on Earth. Then it was Plex Online. And, so we saw a lot of challenges with that, just in a number of different ways. Like, fundamentally, they didn't eat their own dog food. So, like, none of the underlying APIs were accessible to a customer. So that made it extremely difficult, as you can imagine, to integrate with it and to it. So that was like really the first problem we tried to help people solve was how do we actually extend this thing so that we can connect it with SAP, Oracle. As you mentioned, it's a shim, right? It was never really intended to be the ERP system. And so once we kind of solved that problem, then the next problem was, yeah, it does a lot of the MES, but it's not what a enterprise thinks of when they think of MES, right? They're not thinking configuration. They're thinking like this thing's like fits like a glove to our business. Our operating model should drive how the software performs. The software should not drive how we operate. So we had to overcome a lot of those challenges. That's why we architected the Fuuz platform, as a microservice. We're still multi-tenant, API first, right? We've got the data layer. They really gave us all of the tools that we needed to make those customers successful. And as the SI, right, it was our competitive advantage. It was how we got through the market. It's why we did so many Plex deployments, because we had this tool no one else had, and we were able to make it successful. So then we realized like, wow, this actually could work beyond Plex. So that's when we started to kind of branch out and do more with it. But yeah, those are kind of the fundamental challenges with it. You brought up like multi-tenancy is a good point. I mean, it's a great feature. Everybody's on the same version all the time. But that's also a problem, having everybody on the same version, right? It kind of limits where you can deploy that. Regulated industries, right? It doesn't work. So we had to get around those types of issues. It didn't go to the shop floor, so there really was no way to extend it to the industrial controls, not directly, not without, Kepware and like 3 other things, right, to kind of stitch it together. So we tried to solve all of those problems on the fringe, and then ultimately we wound up with a platform.
So what's the elevator pitch for Fuuz? Like, for those who are not familiar with what Fuuz is, if we know that Fuuz it fits in the L3 layer. I really don't want to call it manufacturing execution, because it really isn't. It is definitely more of an industrial intelligence platform. It's way more. MES, obviously, it makes sense. That's where you go to market because people know what MES is, but it's way more than manufacturing execution. But for the sake of this discussion, we'll just assume that most people are going to consider this MES. What is the elevator pitch for Fuuz? Like, A, why Fuuz, and then B, how is Fuuz architected?
Yep. So the elevator pitch, that's kind of funny, because we continue to try to work on like how do we actually explain something that's never existed before, right?
Right. Exactly.
So that it's a challenge, but we're definitely an enterprise grade solution. We kind of start there, right? We're, as you said, like MES oftentimes is kind of a lead in for us in many of the opportunities that we pursue. Also is like WMS. So anything that I would consider in that level 3, CMMS, quality control, anything that really is that bridge
track and
between
trace,
track and
traceability,
trace, everything in that.
Which, by the way, you're tailor made for. The architecture is tailor made for a rock solid track and trace system.
I would say a phenomenal job at all of the core 4. I mean, we build features in as platform features, right? So we don't build a scheduler that handles job shop scheduling. It does, but it's a platform feature that literally, whether you're batch, process, or discrete, you can utilize the tools in the platform. I don't want to say it's like, the closest thing probably out there in the wild would be like Ignition, right? That's the closest thing I've ever come to. Now, one of the things, we have our own data layer, I think, which is a big difference. Other systems don't have. So that gives us the ability, we use GraphQL on top of a MongoDB. So to get into a little bit of that architecture there, but, we have, I hate the term low, no code, but that's kind of the thing, right? So it is definitely a low, no code, but I've always struggled with low no code tools in the past because there's always there's like a barrier, there's like a limitation with all of them, right? And I've used them all the big names, all the nice ones. Some of them are really nice, but they get you like 80% of the way. There's always that last mile, and that last mile, I think, is the difference between a platform and a point solution, right? And that's kind of the way we started to go about that. So I've completely gone away from the whole elevator pitch question because it's really tough. We get hand raises for just about everything throughout the organization. IT will reach out to us because they're frustrated with their iPass tool. They're like Boomi or MuleSoft, right? We fill that gap. We'll get operations folks because they want to connect, collect, and store. We fill that. We'll get MES guys and warehouse management folks. And so like, there's just, unfortunately, there's nothing that we can't do with the platform. Right.
And so the challenge with that is that when you can pretty much do it, when you're a platform for solving problems. I mean, we brought inductive automation. We talked about Ignition, right? Ignition marketed as SCADA. Like they never marketed as anything other than SCADA. And it used to drive me crazy. I would say to them all the time, wait, you're a rapid application development environment. You are a platform for solving problems. You're not SCADA. And they said, and Travis Cox and I have had this conversation a million times. And Travis said, you're right. But how do you market a rapid application development environment? How do you communicate to someone who doesn't know anything about you that you're a platform for solving problems? It's so abstract. So we have to start somewhere and then let them peel back the onion to figure out what the art of the possible is. And that's the challenge you have. Like I think the one big thing that if anybody looked at Fuuz, so real quick, Fuuz is basically multi-tenant. When you buy Fuuz, you end up with a tenant, customer.fuuz.app basically. And the way that you scale is, you land a gateway, a Fuuz gateway inside of a manufacturing facility. You add that gateway through a certified connection to your tenant. And then that gateway is your way into the plant. That's how you talk to devices. It's how you talk to databases. It's how you talk to APIs. But you do all the orchestration in the tenant itself. You could do it down in the gateway, but you do it in the tenant. And so that's how you get scale in the cloud layer. And really, it's the gateways that are connecting you into infrastructure. It's a brilliant architecture. And we see it in lots of places, but I think your implementation of it is the cleanest. Okay, there's the perfect bifurcation between what the gateway is in the plant and what the tenant's responsibility is. But I think anybody who looks at Fuuz and knows anything about manufacturing execution, everyone's going to come to the same conclusion as to like what's the most valuable thing inside of Fuuz, right? And it's the data layer. It is, I was talking to you have an engineer who works in your services group who's a former Ignition guy. And so we were talking Ignition language to each other. And I was like, I want you to tell me what, for you, when you first started working with this, was the most impressive piece. And he said, well, really, it has to be this data layer. It has to be, imagine building data types, this, and I'm not describing the entire data layer here, but the thing that stands out is imagine building data types as function blocks and then being able to wire them together to any other data type in a function block, like in a canvas. And you're able to create relationships between parameters, whole objects and parameters just by dragging a node to another node. I mean, and all the ORM stuff is done in the background for you. You're doing it on the front end. And there really is no relationship you can't create. And then because the API is essentially GraphQL with JSONata, right? We're using JSONata for some decoding and GraphQL for the API, you can see the relationships and the infrastructure. You can graph them. It's really a beautiful, it's a incredibly well done architecture. It's beautifully built. But how do you communicate that? Like for me, I'm an architect. I get to see, oh, wow, I get to see with my own eyes how that scales. What's the biggest challenge? You've built this platform. How do you communicate that to potential customers that is a feature they need, and it's a differentiator in the platform.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? I mean that is our challenge as a business, is how to communicate that. But just like you were talking about with inductive, kind of focusing on that SCADA piece, it's something that people can relate to. That's where we typically go with MES and those layer threes. Those are problems that they can easily identify with and they know they need to solve. So once we can expose them to how we do that within the platform, like how do we do MES? How do we build frontline worker, connected worker applications? How do we handle scheduling, track and trace, all, core 4 plus, right? I think then it's those guys that are looking at other options, right? There's other ways to get to that same end result, much more complicated. We can do it. We're told by our SIs that we have a number of SIs we work with that deploy Fuuz. It's about 7 times faster to deploy an MES solution in Fuuz than traditional methods, right? Like all of the names we've already mentioned in this podcast. So, I think that is really, they see the speed, they see the scale. Not everybody picks up on that data piece, to be honest with you. I think that's definitely a solution architect observation. Some folks do, because like you said, we can go in there on the canvas, we can create these relationships. I click a button, it automatically generates all the APIs. Like we've got so much AI that we've developed under the hood that's doing all of this stuff that's really saving the developer a ton of time. The security is already built in there. There's a ton of stuff that, traditionally, if I had to build an MES, like say an Ignition, I got to think about how are these end users going to log in? How am I going to authenticate? Where am I tracking all of these events, right? How am I going to audit all of this? Like all of that goes completely out the window because it's all baked into the platform. It's just inherent. So you got to see a lot of that stuff. So it's cool, but we don't oftentimes get a chance to get that deep, right? A lot of folks you kind of start to lose them once you get past the like functional layer. A lot of times, right? So
what's the typical engagement? So like, speed and flexibility. Like one of the things when you guys were giving the presentation, like how short your proof of concepts are, like how quickly a POC is actually deployed. Number one, why don't you go ahead and talk about like what your target goal is for a POC to show the art of the possible first off, and then I'll talk a little bit more about like the flexibility and the speed. If people don't understand why Fuuz is so different from a functional perspective, that is an architectural perspective, then what are you selling? Like what are they buying from you when they buy from you in the beginning?
It's definitely the speed, the scale, right, and the common platform. What we hear a lot of times from a lot of the C levels is, we get stuck in these big evaluation processes. They're comparing Fuuz as a platform against 5 or 6 other solutions, most likely, right? You've got your MES players, you got your maintenance guys, you've got your middlewares you're looking at, you've got your OT stuff, right? Your edge, and then on the other column is just Fuuz. So that's like a huge kind of differentiator. CIOs, CTOs, I mean, they're looking to reduce their application footprint, right? Minimize risk.
It's literally it's funny. They'll always have a map of all the software that they're running, and they'll go, whatever, it'll be 60 different platforms, and they'll go, I want that to be 20.
Yeah.
Right. That they'll just pick a number out of the hat. I just want
some random number.
Yeah. Just some random number. I want that to be 20. And that's how platforms end up replacing 40 of them. One platform ends up replacing 40 of the pieces of software that they were running. But yeah, it is huge risk and huge cost.
That's a big piece of kind of where we fit. And that works amazingly well in greenfield deployments, right? Because you want to scale quickly. We're working with an automotive OEM right now, brand new plant, right? New staff, brand new product. Will be probably the first commercial MES system to operate the entire facility, head to tail. So
including control,
including level 2 all the way up to level 5. We're
Wow.
doing
Okay.
MES, WMS, maintenance, quality, everything at the layer 3. So they literally will have two pieces of software. They'll have Fuuz and their ERP running an entire OEM facility.
Can you share what ERP it is or no?
It's going to be Oracle NetSuite,
Okay.
which
Got
is
it.
also pretty incredible because that's like a mid-market ERP. So what they've been able to do is utilize best in breed, but not like overspend. So they didn't have to go to SAP or Oracle because we're filling all of those gaps for them with the platform.
Right. Redefine, like that's one of the big things in Industry 4 is that we're redefining. I keep saying that like Industry 4 is about flattening the stack, right? Where we have this big stack and everything's bifurcated because of the Purdue security model. And, why does L3 even exist? Like, why do we even call it L3? And why do we have an L2 and an L4? And we're really, the lines are becoming really blurred between those layers. And the way I try to describe it is that, you've got these layers, and then what we're doing is we're taking something vertically and running it as a shim, as a bus running up and down, and that's really blurring the lines between what is an L4 function and an L3 function. It does not surprise me looking at your architect. I mean, because the architecture, the way that Fuuz is designed, it easily could be an ERP system if you just added general ledger, right? Like if you had a GL function, it easily could be an ERP system because in the back end, it's an ORM. It's an ORM with a data layer shim in between, and basically everything's JSON, passing back. Everything is a JSON key value pair under the hood. And then you've got an ORM for all your objects, and you have control over the objects you create. So you can create an entity that's an enterprise and an entity that's an asset, and you can wire all those together. That's how Fuuz is developed. And the only thing that keeps you from being an ERP is the GL function, right? I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it couples so well with a mid-market ERP that you don't need to spend, a 9-figure spend or an 8-figure spend on your ERP if you're using Fuuz. That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, we see it quite a bit. That's a pretty big, strategy for us is, we really depend, wholly on our ecosystem. We don't even have a direct sales team here at Fuuz. Right. We work entirely through SIs, and also the OEM, ERP companies. So they'll usually bring us in to manufacturers and industrials when, there's holes that need to be filled.
You guys should be at Digital Stratosphere. So you should go to Stratosphere in Denver, Eric Kimberling's show, because it's the only show I've been to that, where the tip of the spear is ERP, but all the discussion is L3. Like it's all ERP companies there, and that's what that's what Eric's company does. They're an ERP consultant. But you guys really should be there. Like you would really knock some socks off there.
We'll go talk to them.
From your perspective, what makes Fuuz different? So I want to make sure we answer that question. Then I want to ask you what is the problem that it solves, as part of a larger conversation about the problems manufacturers have. But what makes Fuuz different?
From my perspective, where I sit, the couple of things that make Fuuz different, I think for me, it's speed and scale. Because the problems that we're solving could be solved in other ways, for sure, right? But they always end up falling short when you have to scale. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see with the platform. There's a lot of other cool, amazing things that we can do with Fuuz, that we can get into in demos and all of that stuff. But I think for me, that's the big one.
Do you struggle? Well, let me ask you this. So what most people don't know, I mean, I guess if you've never worked with Fuuz, you wouldn't know this. But Fuuz is really a blank canvas. Like when you go to your Fuuz app for the very first time, there's nothing configured. I mean, you have a menu, right? You basically have a menu and so there's nothing in there. I mean, you have to build everything from scratch. And now obviously you can develop apps that you can start with, right? But do you find it's a challenge, like showing someone what Fuuz is? It's kind of like selling the potential of paper,
Yeah.
like a blank canvas, and you're like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you're showing, and you're going, you really want to use this paper because this paper grows. It actually grows, and you'll never run out of room, and you'll always be able to get to whatever you drew on it. And the paper is so good, you don't have to worry about your ink fading, and you don't like. How do you sell a canvas, which really, to what Fuuz looks like to people is a canvas. Yeah. So how do you sell that? I mean, do you start with the customer's problem and work your way back to how Fuuz can solve it? Or do you start with a big, long array of problems that people have had in the past and kind of show all of them? How do you do that?
Yeah. So more often than not, it's the former. More often than not, we're getting a list, and you've seen these RFPs that come across, right, with thousands of line items. And so we'll go through and to your point, you know, in large part, it's a blank canvas. It's a platform, right? So it's intended to be that. We do have a lot of what we call, you know, industry 4 accelerators that we will deploy. We've talked a lot here about MES and WMS and all of these. So these are, like you said, it's an app that you can install. So that includes all the data model, you know, your ISA data model that's just installed, all the user interface for managing work orders and operator control screens and setting up downtime codes. All of that's, it's just there, but it's entirely, you know, extensible. So you can do with that whatever you want using the tools in the platform. So I can extend the data model, I can add things to it, build my own UI using our screen designer and all that good stuff. So that's usually where we'll start. We'll take the RFP, here's all the problems you identified, and we're going to go through these different accelerators and show you what they do out of the box. Like what comes essentially, you know, day one, which usually is like about 80% of what they're looking to do. Right. And oftentimes I find that the other 20% is not going to be solved by any off the shelf solution. You know, it's that other 20% that's really where we get to show the magic of Fuuz, because like in a 30-minute demonstration, I can show them how I'm going to solve that problem that no other software vendor will be able to solve for them. And that's it.
Because you have to build MES. I mean,
yeah, you have to.
You must build MES. And I can't tell you the number of people I've pissed off with that comment. I'm like, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen anyone buy MES. Like, it just doesn't, you don't buy a manufacturing execution system. You build a manufacturing execution system. You may start with something that has core functions, but you're always going to extend it, because the unique thing about manufacturing is that the differentiator for most manufacturers is how they execute their manufacturing. What their value proposition in the market, what makes them competitive, how they compete against, is how they execute the manufacturing. In some cases, it's supply chain optimization, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. The rule is the way I execute manufacturing is what makes me unique. And if that's the case, then it naturally follows that everyone's implementation of manufacturing execution will be different. So therefore, you must build it, right? And it's amazing to me the number of people who freak out about that line. It's like, it's so easily observable, you know?
I think there's definitely like a fear out there, right? When you say build it, I think historically, or, you know, with legacy technology, people think, oh, it's custom software. And that's just not Fuuz, right? You kind of explained it there. You know, everything is just a JSON object on the platform. And that's kind of our secret sauce, is how we convert JSON to like functional components. And so nothing is custom in Fuuz, right? It's all just, you know, it's components, it's building blocks. So, and that's how we're able to uniquely have all of our customers on the same version at all times. You know, so it gives everybody their secret sauce. This was like it was a big hurdle when we were trying to deploy Plex, especially in larger manufacturers, especially in like mixed mode environments, right? You got batch and process going on at the same time, or discrete and process, and you know, it wasn't possible to configure one tenant to operate multi modes of manufacturing. So there was a time when we were in probably a third of all of the Plex sites globally running the plant floor. So to your point, you can't buy MES. You can start there, right? You can start to gain some value, but eventually you're going to outgrow
The way I try to describe it is with a platform. When I say you're building MES, okay, you're building MES in the way that you build something with Legos, okay? But the Legos you buy matter, okay? If I don't have if the building blocks, if the Legos that I have, the assortment I'm choosing from are not flexible enough, then what I ultimately build with a Lego is either going to look highly finished or really rough around the edges. That's what an IoT platform is. An IoT platform is basically Legos. Building custom is starting by molding each individual Lego. No, we're starting with the building blocks and we're putting them together, but they're not all created equal, right? I mean, you got to make sure you have the sizes and the dimensions and the colors and all the things that you're looking for to build what it is you ultimately want to deliver to the customer. And the great IIoT platform has no limit on the assortment of Legos I'm working with. And I can even create my own Lego if I want to. I can extend a Lego to be something it wasn't originally. That's the most flexible implementation. What do your customers say? Like I'm always big on like solving what problem do you solve? And obviously the answer is going to be, it depends on the customer. But if somebody, puts a gun to your head and says, Craig,
Yep.
what problem does Fuuz solve besides scale and flexibility? What is it?
Are there other problems? I mean,
well, they are the key. They are the key problems.
Those are the.
But what are the business problems? What are the business problems?
Yeah, business problems. I would say really around collection of and democratization of their data. For one, right, being able to collect data from the edge in real time, bridge that with data that's coming down from all your northbound systems and getting it into one platform. So they're able to report and find patterns in Fuuz that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So I think that's the really
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, I think it goes back to the extensibility and flexibility, right? I mean, being able to get all of that stuff into a platform with, as you mentioned before, like the graphical layer on top of it, we can turn that over as a tool to our MCP server, right? Plug your favorite LLM in, and in 5 seconds, you're solving problems that would have taken you years to do. You're not trying to bridge 28 different SQL databases together across your enterprise. It's harmonized. It just puts it all where it needs to be in a way that it needs to be. We didn't design it that way 10 years ago when we started. We had no idea, that MCP and AI was going to come along, but it just so happens that we designed it perfectly.
Yeah, I say this with UNS all the time. It's like, I got lucky. I mean, I didn't know large language models were coming. It's just because I picked an architecture that used the way that human beings logically think to organize data, and large language models happen to be trained on the way human beings speak and organize. We just got lucky that they're a match made in heaven. And it's the same thing. Your architect, I told you guys this when I met, your underlying architecture, that I've only seen one other company do it the way you guys do it, and it's Litmus. You guys, for you in L3 and Litmus, really they're kind of everywhere, but they specialize in L1 on the edge as an edge data operations platform. The data layers that you guys have are very similar in terms of how data is passed openly within the platform. And it made both of you uniquely positioned to natively integrate large language model agents, and they can decipher what's happening under the hood easily. I mean, it's not going to be a lot of work for you guys to just give a simple instruction, build me a data type that does X, Y, and Z, and connect it to this type of data type, and the LLM is going to be able to do it without the human being having to wire everything together in your platform because of how it's built.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we're doing it already. Just since we met, we've already done that, so The way the platform is architected does give us, I think, kind of a distinct advantage, and inherently then for our customers as well, right? I mean, that's the goal, is to be able to provide them with tools and capabilities so they don't have to constantly go out and look for, I've seen these maps of all these different solutions. It's confusing, right? Like, where do I even start as a manufacturer on this industry 4 journey? Because there's what, 5,000 products out there from L1 to L4. And, so we try to simplify that. We try to distill that in especially for our enterprise customers, they really get it. So it's been a long time coming to have a platform like Fuuz that we can deploy in the cloud, enterprise scale, secure. IT buys in. IT is typically our customer, by the way. So I think that's also a rarity when it comes to an industrial platform. Typically you're working with the OT folks, limited time, limited budgets, got to get this POC done. Right. My plant manager is barking at me. I got to get this thing. I got to get them this graph. We usually come in, from the top with companies that are pretty strategic in their digital transformation, right? They have a vision, they have a goal. They've got hundreds of facilities. They want some common infrastructure. They want a backbone. Love the UNS concept. I think it makes total sense to be able to see things semantically the way it makes sense.
Because then you only have to teach how the business is organized.
Right. Yeah,
you don't have to teach data and information models. You don't have to teach them where every entry point, ingress point is. You find this data in this spreadsheet and you find this thing over here. What you do is you just show them how the business is organized, and then they go find the thing they're looking for.
Yep. Yeah. So there are so many benefits.
So obviously all the big upside for like developers and SIs is obviously Fuuz. It's cloud-based, multi-tenant. All I got to do is land a gateway inside the plant, or gateways in the plant if I want to. And flexible, scalable. There's nothing I can't build in it, right? There's a bunch of upsides, right? What are the biggest challenges when someone starts working with Fuuz for the first time? You're onboarding an SI, or an end user goes ahead and goes direct through you in the ERP. What are the biggest challenges? What are the hurdles to learning the platform and getting the most out of it?
I mean, that is the biggest challenge, because it does have so much depth and breadth to it, that just getting past that initial, especially for an SI who's planning to solve some pretty complex challenges, for somebody that just wants to come in and connect to a machine, collect some data, store it in a table, and do a visualization, that's not difficult to do.
Right.
You can.
I mean, I was able to do that the night before. I mean, I was able to. Yeah. I deployed a gateway on my local machine, connected to a broker. I actually had to do a different tenant. It was the second tenant you gave me that I did it on, but the first tenant I didn't have the permission to be able to do that. But adding the gateway was as simple as just generating a key, adding the key to the gateway. Then the gateway had permission to talk to my tenant. And then I went in and created a MQTT connector, and then I assigned that connector to the gateway, and then I had the data up in the tenant just like that. It was very simple. I mean, I just did it in my hotel room. It was not that complicated.
I was a little nervous just letting you loose in there.
You said don't, because I was in some environment I could really screw up, like, or whatever. But
it's my demo environment. But and certainly, Lance was probably even more nervous, right? But yeah, I think that really we got a lot of great feedback from you that we're taking back to the product, and we're gonna help reduce that learning curve for somebody to be able to go in. And completing that task is one thing, but then taking it to the point where you can actually drive some value from that data, visualizing data on a dashboard. I think that's kind of like table stakes these days. Now being able to take that and being able to, process that, getting it into our MES or your existing MES or some other level 3, and then just keep going up the stack from there. We can make that journey a lot simpler. And that's something that we're working on, currently. We've got a bunch of training online. We have a free training academy, right, at training.fuuz.com. all of our stuff is publicly accessible. All of our release notes, our knowledge base. We got dozens of how-to videos. So we try to reduce the barriers. But it is, people will ask all the time, hey, can I get like a free trial? It's almost like asking the SAP salesman for a free trial of SAP, right? Like, I mean, how is that going to go? Where you're going to log in and you're going to be like, where do I begin?
And the other thing is, because you guys are cloud-based, every tenant you're paying for.
Right. Infrastructure is out of the box with Fuuz. So our customers do not provide any hardware or infrastructure. We support that. We monitor it. So our DevOps team handles all the security, everything. It's literally one-click deploy. New customer signs up. You got an email, right? And said, click here, set up your password. You were in building an app in minutes.
Yeah. But the one big thing that I left with the team, I said, the one thing you have to communicate, I think you guys have to communicate to the Industry 4 community is that when, inductive automation, it doesn't cost them anything. They have to pay for bandwidth on AWS. They house all their install files on AWS. So every time someone downloads it, they're paying like a nominal amount for the bandwidth to serve the download file to the person, but there's no cost for someone to install it. But if you create a dev environment for someone, there's a significant cost to you for the generating the tenant, because that's all running in your cloud host. And, it's not cheap. There's a significant cost to just spinning up a tenant, right? Which makes the multi-tenant environment, cloud-based environment, it's much better on the back end, but you got a little bit barrier on the front end because there is a cost to spin it up. Like, so if you go, hey, I want to kick the tires, you have to pay for me to kick the tires, or I got to be willing to pay you to kick the tires, right?
Traditionally,
because there is a cost. There is a cost.
There absolutely is a cost. Yeah, just as anybody listening to this who's tried to do anything in the cloud before knows, right? You start spinning up EC2s or compute resources and a database and everything else, and then you got to pipe it all together, right? Depending on which. I know Google's pretty good, but we put everybody on AWS. Big part of that is because of the uptime. The 5 nines we need in manufacturing. But there is a cost. We are working on something that maybe we can talk more about when you come on our podcast.
All right, sweet.
Yeah, so we have a lot. We have a lot going on. You gave us a lot to think about. Let's just put it that way.
Awesome. So where is Fuuz going? So with that, I have two. I have one more Fuuz question, which is, where are you guys going? So after we met, what did you guys decide? Where is Fuuz going? And then I have a question to ask you about just manufacturing in general. But
sure,
where's Fuuz going to start?
Yeah, I mean, we're after we met with you, our whole team was really energized, and that gave us a lot to think about. We want to double down on this community, this OT, this citizen developer community that's out there. We want to be able to get the platform in a lot more hands and just kill those barriers that we just talked about, both from a learning curve perspective, plus, the cloud infrastructure costs that we incur. So we're going to address those things head on, and we're going to keep solving the same problems we've been solving, hopefully bigger, and better problems. I know we're going to be presenting it at Prove It, so we're super excited about that. I think we've got some really interesting ideas that we want to run by you for that. I think we would be uniquely positioned to show a L1 all the way to L5.
Well, what's really interesting is there isn't really. I walked away going, there isn't really a competitor to Fuuz. There are, if you look at the Venn diagram,
right.
You're your own unique. When you said that, this has never really existed before. it's similar to this over here, but not quite. It's similar to that over there, but not quite. And the big advantage you have at Prove It is that there is no apples to apples comparison to what your capabilities are, and that's one of the reasons why you should be there, so that manufacturers can see, okay, so I'm not limited by just this suite of options. Yeah, I'm super excited to see what you guys do at Prove It. I mean, if I'm being honest with you,
I am too.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what you guys actually do.
Yeah.
Because just like, Tulip is there's not really anything like Tulip either, right? I mean, it's a mostly MES with smart tables in the background that's operator focused, like operator workstation focused, right? And they had a chance to show there was no one who really presented anything like them last year, and you're going to be in the same boat, except at a much larger enterprise scale is right. What your potential is.
Yeah, they did a great job. A few of us were at the show last year and we're just really blown away. I mean, given that that was the first show, it was just incredible to see the reaction. And the attendance was great. So we were all very disappointed in ourselves that we didn't try to present this past one. But this is a little bit different for us, kind of venturing more into the industry for OT space. Cause like I said before, we've always been kind of that IT problem solver. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of coming in as, the new guy, that's going to just throw it off track. But no, I think it'll be great. So we're excited.
Well, but it's you're an interesting marriage between OT and IT, right? I mean, sure. I think the way you've gone to market is through IT, but your real power is in solving OT problems and scaling them the way IT would scale, right? Whereas in manufacturing, one of the biggest issues is the IT-OT divide, that bifurcation. You either solve it the way IT solves it, or you solve it the way OT solves it, and I have to accept the limitations of whichever way I go. You guys are uniquely positioned, and it all boils down to the way the gateway's relationship to the tenant. I mean, it's really kind of brilliant the way you did it. The cloud-based tenant, which is really where all the brains are, that's really an IT solution. It really is, and it's why it would appeal to IT. But the gateway is very much an OT solution that is just certified and connected to that IT infrastructure. I mean, that gateway is very much an OT solution, and it's brilliant. The way that it's designed is just a brilliant. So many other people have tried, like Microsoft tried that approach, and even AWS tried it with Greengrass, and they never really quite got it right because it was an IT gateway in the OT environment. Your gateway is really an OT gateway in the OT environment, and that's the differentiator. It really is. It's OT centric. All right, so the manufacturing piece here. So, we're in this weird time with large language models and agentic AI, right? I mean, obviously, first time in my career I've seen anything like this. This is our, the transistor. This is our transistor, large language models and agents. How do you see manufacturing changing? I'll tell you how I eventually, once you answer, I'll give my take. But you've been doing this long enough time. You've solved enough problems. How do you see the way manufacturers are going to go about solving problems changing, as it relates to, what is agentic AI and large language models impact going to be on that going forward, from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, I see us being able to put some technology into people's hands that know how to solve the problem, but don't know how to do it from a technical sense, who are now going to be able to solve those problems. I mean, we see, these dashboards, right? That's great. I mean, that's cool. But what I think we're going to be seeing here is, department heads and production supervisors being able to say, into the LLM, right? And give it some commands and have it auto adjust parameters and, predictive, right? Maintenance and quality, and just putting all of that down a level that they can understand and deal with. So yeah, I see it really creating more of a separation between the folks that know the problem, they understand what it takes to solve it, and then the technical folks that oftentimes you have to drag along. And even our own engineers, self-admittedly, they're like, we don't understand manufacturing, right? Like, we know ones and zeros. So I think it's going to help bridge that divide.
I agree wholeheartedly. I did not know that was going to be your answer. I agree wholeheartedly. Here's something I only really just sort of came to this conclusion in the last 48 hours. This term vibe coding, I keep hearing, yes. I keep seeing it on LinkedIn and stuff. First off, I hate that term. It's very condescending. I would never say to someone, "Oh, you did a really awesome job vibe coding that. Good for you." But here's what I see in that. So if I give the supervisor the ability to kick the tires on a technical solution, because the tool that the supervisor now has a tool that gives them access to using the technology to solve their problem, right? If I can ask an agent to build my spreadsheet for me, then I am no longer beholden to the person who we've tasked with building my spreadsheets, right? Okay. Now, is the supervisor working with an agent going to build a better spreadsheet than an expert in Microsoft Excel? Of course not. But what it will do is that supervisor is going to get better, more fluent in how this technology works. And it's also going to make the person who builds, I'm using spreadsheets as the example just to not pick on anybody. The person who builds the spreadsheets for a living, they're going to feel a little heat under their collar, and they're probably going to be a little bit more collaborative with the supervisor going forward. And where I see agentic AI really helping manufacturing, speed. Number one, manufacturers, agentic AI is going to make me faster at solving problems as a technical person. So therefore, I would say that manufacturers don't solve, they don't solve every problem they have in a year. They pick the 10 problems they have, the biggest problems they have, that they have enough capital. They go, here's how much capital I have to solve. Here are our 10 biggest priorities, and we're going to ignore everything else because it's going to take this amount of capital to solve those 10. Now, that capital doesn't solve just those 10, it solves 30.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we're going to see that speed up, but we're also going to see a human element. The human element is, I think, agentic AI is really going to level the playing field. And so the technical gatekeepers will have a lot less power over the people who rely on them for the technology. And that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. And also, the technical person's going to benefit if a supervisor is able to mock up a solution using an agent and then turn over their mock-up to the technical person. It's much more likely that the technical resource is going to deliver on exactly what that non-technical person was asking for, if they have a mock-up that they then worked with agents on. And I'm going all the way to, you talked about the dashboard piece. The most impressive thing about when I showed you guys that dashboard demo, the thing that's most impressive to me about that is a supervisor could build that. So a supervisor could give the instruction to say, build me. And then they go, you know what? This isn't exactly what I need, but this is basically what I'm talking about. Can you harden this? And then you hand it over to the technical resource to say, okay, I'm going to take what that supervisor mocked up using an agent, and I'm going to develop it for production. Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. With that, key takeaways for manufacturers evaluating digital tools. This is the big one. So the reason I want to ask you this question is you go to market mostly through IT right now, and you're always competing against 5, 6, 7 other platforms, right? And if you look at your list of the platforms you guys beat in the market, clearly you know how to advise people on how to evaluate digital tools. So what are the key lessons. This is our big, moment. If you're talking to all the manufacturers right now and you're saying, hey, listen, you're going to be evaluating digital tools, here are the 2 or 3 things you absolutely should remember when you're doing so.
Yeah, well, one is the one thing that always kind of sets us apart in those scenarios is the architecture. I mean, I think you need to evaluate the architecture of the technology you're buying. Is it monolithic? Is it microservice? Is it because that really is fundamentally future scale and extensibility. So if it's monolith, I would walk away. I would run away. So that's number one. We usually get to that point, and then we're the last man standing most of the time. Cloud, I think a lot of manufacturers are still a bit reluctant about cloud, right? IT's not. IT's bought in. Everything's going cloud, Oracle, SAP. I mean, it's just the way it is. So at some point, we're going to have to just accept that there will be some cloud here. So we overcome that quite often, as you said, with like the gateway component, which nobody else has. So I can run Siemens in the cloud, I can run Factory Talk in the cloud, but that doesn't address the problem. And it's still not cloud technology just because I'm hosting it on another server. So, future-proof, scalability, extensibility. Beyond that, a lot of these platforms need to be able to just give you the tools, the building blocks that you talked about to build what it is you need to build, and also give you that escape hatch so that if you need to build a tool, you have the ability to build that tool. So just don't get locked in, obviously avoid vendor lock. I would say don't buy software from a hardware vendor.
Right.
Right. Isn't that like a foregone conclusion?
Well, it should be now.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to beat up on Rockwell too much, but if there's any, Rockwell still makes the best PLCs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they make some of the worst software. And even when they buy software, they make it worse.
Yeah.
It's really insanity. It's really insanity.
Yeah.
It's just, and then it's a perfect example of Rockwell should have stayed a hardware company. But
yeah.
All right, with that, Craig, I look forward to being on your podcast here in the next month, right? We're doing it within the next month, right?
Yeah.
And if you guys want to see Fuuz, you guys can reach out. It's fuuz.app. Is that the?
Go to our website, it's fuuz.com. Yep.
Fuuz.com. FUUZ.com.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And Craig and the gang are going to be at Prove It in February, in Dallas at the convention center downtown at Reunion Tower. So with that, thank you guys. Thanks, Craig, for joining us. Like, subscribe, comment down below. We'll see you guys in the next one.